Hey everyone, and thanks for jumping back into the cryptoverse. Today, we're going to talk about Bitcoin and how it relates to the NASDAQ because Bitcoin has been rejected off of its own bull market support band, and so has the NASDAQ. And we want to discuss the risks associated with that in the short term. If you guys like the content, make sure you subscribe to the channel, give the video a thumbs up, check out the sale on the premium list at intothecryptoverse.com. Let's go ahead and jump in. So, Bitcoin is, simply put, it is in danger of putting in a lower low. Okay. And the reason we know this is a distinct possibility is because Bitcoin has been rejected off of its bull market support band. When you get a rejection, you typically do go put in a lower low. Not every time, but most of the time you do go put in a lower low. There are instances in the past that you can find where we go down and we retest the prior low and then we go back up to retest the bull market support band. But even in those cases, a lot of them we end up putting in a lower low regardless. So I want people to understand there is a risk right now in the market of putting in a lower low. And if that does happen, you need to know that the altcoin market will take an even bigger hit. Okay. It's hard to really say what'll happen, at any given point in time on any given day. I could put out a video and then the next day the price could pump or the price could drop quickly. But just recognize that one of the overarching risks right now is that Bitcoin could in fact put in a lower low after getting rejected off of the bull market support band. And furthermore, I think the reason for concern here is the NASDAQ has already put in a lower low. Okay, so if you sort of take a look here at the NASDAQ, you can see it put in a low in late January, but it's actually been putting in a lower low now. And I have to wonder if it's sort of paving the path that Bitcoin is going to take, and then Bitcoin could then go maybe put in a lower low as well. So I want people to recognize the risk involved right now. When Bitcoin's above the bull market support band and trending higher, DCAing it typically works out even in the short term. You need to understand that when we're in a downtrend and getting rejected off of the bull market support band, I'm not saying anything specific whether you should or should not DCA into Bitcoin, because those who DCA into Bitcoin over the macro scale are typically the ones that win out the most. But the problem is that a lot of people can become somewhat disillusioned with the cryptocurrency asset class, DCAing in a downtrend, because downtrends can last longer than we really want them to. Okay, so I want you to not be upset with the prospects of putting in a lower low. I just want you to recognize it as a distinct possibility if history is any indication. And the history that I'm talking about is namely looking at prior times when we've been rejected by the bull market support band, and then we consequently went on to put in fact, a lower low. This happened in 2019. You can see we came below the bull market support band. We went up to it. We got rejected. We put in a lower low. Okay, same thing over here, right? We came down. We went up to the bull market support band. We got rejected. We put in a lower low. We went up to the bull market support band. We got rejected. There's a good chance we're going to put in a lower low. Or at the very least, perhaps retest the prior low. Okay, and the reason I say that is because if you go back to 2018, there were definitely times when we would put in a low, get rejected off the bull market support band, and we actually did not put in a lower low before retesting it. So like we would go down and then we rallied back up to the bull market support band, and then we ended up putting in a lower low later on. But you can see that typically getting rejected off of the bull market support band means that you're either going to go down close to the prior local low or you're going to put in a new low. All right, so that's typically what it means. I think the biggest risk right now is looking at these traditional markets and realizing that they really don't look that great. Okay, and I mean I'm very much a long-term macro bull for a lot of these major indices, but right now, in the last time was in March of 2020, these downtrends can be absolutely brutal. And when you see these instances in the past when the NASDAQ went through one of these brutal corrections, you can see March of 2020, and you know what happened with Bitcoin in March of 2020. I mean, it also had a fairly brutal correction. But you also see what happened to the NASDAQ in October of 2018 through December of 2018. This was a 3-month downturn in the market. What happened during that 3-month downturn in the market for the NASDAQ? What did you see Bitcoin do in late 2018? You can see that it started off in October. The NASDAQ started dropping, and then Bitcoin basically continued its downtrend until December, which is when the NASDAQ rebounded, and then the NASDAQ started a fresh rally, and then Bitcoin started a fresh rally. So I want people to consider here that, in the short term, there definitely is a risk of Bitcoin putting in a lower low. And, if you want my opinion on it, I mean, I suppose that 33K could be retested if the NASDAQ continues this downtrend. And maybe we can hold the line there and come back up for a retest. But if we go below the prior low of 33K, I think it stands to reason that the most likely stop next would be the summer low, right? So around 29K. And if we put in, if Bitcoin does end up going back to 29K by, say the middle of March, and we do confirm another lower low, then what usually would come after that would probably be, an attempt to put in a higher low, or at least put in a higher high based on this high here. So I would think that you would probably see some type of move back up to then see if we can reclaim what we've lost if this situation plays out. And then if we just get rejected again, then we have to keep playing the same game, and then we might go and put in an even lower low again. So I want people to recognize that, look, in this market, there's all sorts of theories about what's going to happen. But I would not recommend being deterministic about anything. It's easy to want to be deterministic about things and say things have to play out a certain way, but I would not be deterministic about anything. I generally assume that Bitcoin trends up with time, but there definitely are periods where we can have these fairly brutal corrections. We had one over here that honestly was relatively tame compared to what we saw in 2019, and what we saw in 2019 was relatively tame compared to what we saw in 2018. So this is the state of the market right now, and we have to respect it, okay? We will eventually get back above the bull market support band, but in the short term, Bitcoin has in fact been rejected by it, and I think it makes sense to respect the rejection, right? In the same way that we respect holding the line, which typically means we're going to put in a new high, like we did here in the summer of 2021 or September 2021 and in late 2020, we respect it when we hold it as support. I also think it makes sense to respect it when we hold it as resistance. And while we want to rationalize why in the short term things have to get better because of all the good news coming out, look, at the end of the day, I don't really think the news means a whole lot with respect to the price. And I think that there's a higher probability, not a certainty, there's a higher probability that Bitcoin will at least retest the prior low. And if not, I think it'll come close. And it easily could go put in a lower low and maybe go back to the summer of 2021 low. Now, listen, this is a brutal time in the market. Make no mistake about it. I'm not going to sugarcoat it, right? It's a difficult time in the market right now, and we are in fact in a downtrend, a confirmed downtrend after putting in a series of lower highs and lower lows with rejections off of the bull market support band. Make no mistake about it. It's a downtrend, and it's a brutal one. If you can stick around, I do think you will be rewarded if you can just stick around crypto for a while. Okay, but in the short term, you need to have your expectations in the right place. And if you're constantly buying into the short-term narrative of alt season is going to happen tomorrow and Bitcoin is going to go parabolic tomorrow, while there is a probability that you're right? There's a probability that line of thinking is right. I don't think it's the most probable scenario in the short term. Okay, and earlier on, we were, I was somewhat hopeful that we could get back above it, but right now we have to pivot to what the price is telling us. And right now, it's being broadcast as clear as day that Bitcoin is in a downtrend, and it's been rejected now off of the bull market support band 2 separate times. For me, what does that mean? It means, look, we are definitely in a risk-off environment. You can see it by the NASDAQ being in a downtrend, which we've seen these similar types of moves in prior risk-off environments, like the end of 2018, like the early part of 2020 with that drop associated with that. And then right now we are also seeing that same type of price action play out. And also furthermore, the dollar is in an uptrend. So the dollar's in an uptrend, the NASDAQ's in a downtrend, the S&P's in a downtrend, Bitcoin's in a downtrend, altcoins are in a worse downtrend than Bitcoin. So I think we have to respect the price action and say, you know what? Whatever happens here in the short term, it's just noise. However, there is a strong possibility of Bitcoin putting in a lower low. And, you know, I don't say that lightly. I don't like, you know, spreading FUD, as it were, but I also want to be realistic and not say things that I don't actually believe. And right now, I do believe that Bitcoin is more likely to retest some of these prior lows than immediately skyrocket. What would cause me to change my mind on that? Well, you know, I mean, if something crazy happens and the NASDAQ starts pumping, then you know, the market can quickly change. But the problem is that when the NASDAQ's in a downtrend, we usually see Bitcoin in a downtrend, and sometimes the NASDAQ can lead Bitcoin into that downtrend. Okay, so like in 28 at the very end of 2018, you know, you can see that the NASDAQ started its downtrend October 1st, and it did not let up for 3 months. 3 months. Bitcoin, on the other hand, back then in late 2018, you can see that it didn't really start moving down until mid-November. So it sort of held for a few weeks, and then we moved down pretty quickly. So I want people to be aware that the market is in a very fragile place right now. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. It is. And you need to have a strategy to navigate this thing if we put in lower lows. And a lot of times, as I've said in the last several videos, you know, having cash on hand makes a lot of sense. Not betting the family farm on every dip, because there's at least a decent probability there's going to be another dip that takes us lower. So momentum is strong, and remember that when the momentum's to the downside, we have to respect it. Doesn't mean it won't eventually turn back up, but right now it's to the downside, and we need to respect the rejection by Bitcoin off of its bull market support band in the same way that we would respect it holding it as support and thus putting in a higher high. We now need to see that, look, it's holding it as resistance, and therefore it seems likely that we're either going to retest the low or put in a lower low. And that typically would mean that the altcoin market will drop even worse if that plays out. Okay, would love to be wrong. I have no problem being wrong. I've been wrong about many things on this channel. And you know, I'm not here to pretend like I'm going to get everything right, because I'm not. But it does certainly seem like we are in danger of putting in lower low, and that, you know, if you just sort of fall for the idea that every dip is going to be the bottom, then you can end up in this like endless cycle of thinking that, you know, every dip's the bottom, and then you put all your cash in and then it goes lower. And for some people, they might rationalize it and say, well, you know, they're a long-term investor, it doesn't really matter. And that's true, but it doesn't discount the fact that if you put all your money into the market at once and then it goes lower, you won't be able to take advantage of that situation, right? It's sort of like back over here in 2018. You know, I was DCAing Bitcoin over here, and then we dropped 50%. Okay. And if I had put all my money in right here, I wouldn't have had any to buy over here, which then gave you that 4x move whenever it picked back up. But if you had put it all right here, this move would have only been a 2x move. If you had put it all here and then you waited for the bottom and then to come up, you would have been fine either way, right? You would have been fine either way, but you certainly would have preferred to have at least had some cash to put in down here. Now, in the same way, you know, acting deterministic is a bit ridiculous, and that's why I still was DCAing over here, even though I knew there was a possibility that we could go down to the 200-week moving average. So I do think that it makes sense to not be overly deterministic and say anything specific is going to happen, which is why I DCA'd over here. But you also need to have a plan in case the floor falls out and we go put in a lower low, because I imagine that would be a pretty, you know, another opportunity to, you know, buy the dip, as they say. So consider the market for what it is. Right now, we do remain in a fairly brutal downtrend, and we need to respect the price action until we are told otherwise. Thank you guys for tuning in. Make sure you subscribe, give the video a thumbs up, check out the sale on the premium list, intothecryptoverse.com. I'll see you next time. Bye.